Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Business Bites webinar. I'm Henry. I'm here from the Chamber. I am joined by Tony Berry today, who's going to be doing our presentation on the future of payments. I'm also joined today by Emily O'Neill from Not Another Marketing Agency, who are the proud sponsors of Business Bites for this session. So I'd just like to offer our thanks to them. Without them, of course, this wouldn't be possible. However, without taking up any more time, I'm now going to pass you over to Tony, who's going to be delivering this session for us. So, Tony, over to you.
Thank you very much, Henry. So first of all, just to say, I apologise that there's an awful lot to try and cram into quite a short segment here. So in terms of if I start to touch on anything you would like more information, in terms of sharing the deck, these will be things that we make available. But yeah, there's obviously an awful lot more to these topics. I probably could talk for a couple of hours. So if there is anything more you would like to understand, by all means, reach out to me afterwards. LinkedIn directly, whatever works for yourselves. So as a quick introduction, so Payment Guru is basically it's my baby. In terms of who I am, I've worked in card processing now for 14 years. I've actually worked not just working down the high street. I've worked with the likes of Man United, Weller, and McDonald's hotels. I've been, like I say, in the industry for 14 years. That's with two major providers, Barclaycard, and then a company called Fiserv. Fiserv, in case you didn't realise, are the world's largest card processor and also world's largest card issuer. In that time, being one of the top sales team, but probably slightly interesting and a bit different. I'm also a trained credit manager. So I've been on the other end of payments, collecting debt. And this, I hope and feel, gives me a very rounded opportunity to discuss the payment landscape and understanding actually how it impacts a business and the wider sort of view of things. Here's a really big overview of everything we do at Payment Guru. I won't go into this too much, but it just gives you an idea that we do cover an awful lot of the industry, and also payments every business is taking. Core of what we do is card processing, but there is an awful lot more to it. And we go to market as a consultancy, so we can advise you on what to do, a brokerage, so getting you the best deal possible, but probably most importantly, solution provider. So making sure that you get the best solutions for your business and driving you forward. So on with kind of the main part today. In terms of card processing in particular, if we look at the industry, we've got very much the traditional. So for want of a better term, these are all the traditional, shall we say, bank-led solutions. On the left-hand side. So in fairness, I partner with most of these guys, but what they actually do at the front end is relatively basic. It's a chip and pin machine, it's an online payment, and that's kind of it. Some of the more transitional ones, these are slightly better solutions. They've integrated more deeply into other technologies. Something we might refer to as embedded payments, so actually being part of a solution, or what we'd call an independent software vendor, ISV, to make things within that ecosystem, everything is delivered. But more in the, shall we say, the new space and the future space, we've got some of the more interesting providers such as Nuvei, Checkout, Stripe, Bridge and IXOPay. These are what we call payment orchestration. Again, topic probably of its own right, but this is basically allowing you to have one ecosystem and move it into multiple territories with hundreds of different technologies, but it basically acts as an integration hub for your business. Stripe, you may have seen more recently, very, very fast growth company, very, very good at online payments. And then someone like Adyen is what we'd refer to as a full stack or omni-channel provider. So they can do everything in every space. So that's face-to-face, cardholder not present, online. But the reason I call them a new and future one is, again, the world of embedded payments, but also card issuing. There's a lot of businesses trying to take the issuing side and what we call the acquiring side, so taking the payment and trying to have that whole value chain across the board. And that's where a lot of the power comes. And that's where a lot of the movement and acquisition of businesses seems to be at the moment. If we look at just actually terminals themselves, again, just to sort of show you the future. So if we look at the top, these are the more, ironically, these are still actually current ranges. So the Verifone, the Ingenicos, Spires, these are very much more what we see as a traditional chip and pin machine. And then you've got on the right-hand side unattended for things like parking. Again, we're seeing a huge growth in, say, EV sectors for obvious reasons, but very much the future has been with Android. So my old employer, Clover, was one of the first and early adopters, but now you've probably seen an awful lot of the PAX devices, and one of the newer devices on the market is Castles. The reason these are so interesting is that because it's Android based, you can put an app on a device and that device can do basically whatever you want it to within a certain number of reasons. So this is where an awful lot of growth and change is coming, because the terminal can effectively do whatever you want it to. Again, coming to just sort of basic payment technology. So at the moment, you're obviously no doubt very au fait with chip and pin, contactless. Contactless limit at the moment is £100. You may or may not be aware, but if it's paid with Apple Pay or Android Pay, it is technically unlimited because you've already had a authentication via your face or via your thumbprint. And relatively recently for online, we had 3D Secure version 2. And that's where you've now got multi-factor, I should say two-factor authentication. It's been a bit trickier, but it does mean that the security for a business is substantially higher. And the benefit of that as well from being a consumer, if it's more secure for the business, then you're less at risk of fraud as well. So there are some positives there. In terms of where things are more than likely going to be moving in the future, but as with most things, careful what you wish for. There is the idea of fingerprints. I should stress this is different to thumbprint on your phone. So this would be potentially embedded in the card technology or on the payment device. Eye recognition, sorry. And of course, AI, as with most things, seems to be fueling a lot of the development in payment technology, and be that just assessing of the data, or in fact, a lot of the security mechanisms use what we call machine learning at the moment to detect potential fraud. No doubt all seen these in some way, shape or form. Obviously, McDonald's is by far one of the most leaders. But you know, these are amazing for a business because it can basically mean that you don't have to have a member of staff. So a lot of businesses have really adopted this, certainly since COVID, to reduce the amount of contact with customers. Again, blessing and a curse. I'm sure there's many who would say that these are a negative, reducing customer services, but at the same time can be a big positive for a business in terms of being able to sell a lot faster and easier. And again, if they're rolled out correctly, there's an awful lot of benefits to these, and in fact, it's a better customer journey when done properly. This is where, again, things can get quite interesting with the Android devices. So where traditionally a chip and pin machine was relatively dumb, so it just took a payment, by now using that payment device, instead of someone coming to your table at a restaurant and writing things on a piece of paper, their chip and pin machine can in fact now be their full EPOS. So it suddenly changes completely how a lot of businesses can work. They can now give a payment device to every one of their staff. You can turn the tables much faster, and it also means that you should be getting much better customer service. So the idea of a lot of the solutions now is you're improving the journey of the customer, you're improving the journey for the staff, and actually this can mean more sales for a business, because if you're improving service, more opportunities to be engaging with the staff, you're more likely to pay, order that extra bottle of wine, that extra drink, etc. Goes even further than this. As you'll see, hopefully from the right, the size of these devices is far, far smaller as well. So that's one of my favourite devices, PAX A77. But again, it's bearing in mind that you can now start to fuse together the face-to-face world and the online world, which I'll come to in a little bit more regarding contextual commerce. But again, it's the idea of using your personal mobile device, so the customer's mobile device rather than a device from the business, and you can start to leverage this, and I'll come to that with QR codes as well. Sorry, I know I'm rattling through this, but like I say, there is an opportunity to speak and ask questions at the end. So in terms of something else, this is open banking. So open banking has got a lot of different meanings in different contexts, but the open banking requirement was to allow banks to open up what we call the back end of their APIs and allow other companies, potentially non-financial businesses, to start actually using their systems and the rails of what they do. Where this got quite interesting in terms of the payment world is that we can facilitate in a few clicks well, now faster funding transaction. So instead of paying potentially quite high card transaction fees, or on the adverse of asking a client to do a BACS payment or fast funding, but it's quite clunky, you could now send someone a payment link, open that, and with a few clicks and probably a thumbprint or facial recognition, that amount and that bank account is captured. So it's far more secure. It gets away from potential fraud, change of bank details, some other things. And again, there's certain reconciliation tools that we can provide that basically means that it's very, very easy to manage. So instead of having individual payments coming in, you can have a lot more control over your credit control journey and get the money in a far, far easier way. But again, the price point of this is significantly lower than most other options. Where this gets quite interesting is open banking is saying very much that it could even replace the direct debit solution. So there's legislation and that at the moment, but there's an awful lot of focus on this area because it could also remove the need for recurring card payments. So, for example, your Spotify and your Netflix subscription. This is a really, really big growth area. There's been an awful lot of companies in this area. And yeah, the irony is that this will actually massively reduce costs for businesses. So a lot of those businesses probably won't be here soon because they don't make huge revenue. But like I say, from a business perspective, very, very interesting area. Where it gets for me even slightly more interesting, this can also, with the right providers, be delivered on a chip and pin machine, so a face-to-face transaction. So if you put this in perspective, let's say you're booking, you're buying a sofa, instead of paying on card, that business might incur a cost of 1%. If they paid by this method, it might only be, say, 50 pence. So again, it could be done on a chip and pin machine, face-to-face, or if you look at the right-hand side, it can be delivered in a way that you can actually give your customers multiple options. And as you'll see from that flow, it's very, very straightforward. Select the bank and your face has ID'd it. So again, very, very few clicks, and making payments frictionless, as we say, is a very important method. One area that seems to be gathering a lot of momentum, a lot of providers are very interested in this space. However, at the moment, it's more traditionally seen this will be helping a lot of micro SMEs. Could also be very, very useful for, say, charities and just smaller businesses, is the opportunity to actually turn your own mobile phone into a payment device. Now, it'll be interesting to see when this becomes a bit more common as to how well this is received by consumers, because obviously you're paying on a random person's phone and using the NFC reader, the near field communication, for that to read a contactless payment. So there's a few positives and negatives for this. The real benefit is that most people have got their mobile on them. You generally get very anxious if you've not charged it and all of these sort of things. So, you know, traditionally, most people will have their mobile and look after that. So to actually have this facility as a business is incredibly cheap overhead in terms of CapEx. Generally has a higher transactional fees, a higher OpEx. But in terms of day-to-day usage, it should be remembered this will only work for contactless transactions. It's not a full chip and pin solution, so it can be a bit limited in some of its scope. But that said, great way for a small business, or again, I've spoken to businesses who maybe would have had 200 chip and pin machines. It's a great way for them to also maybe take something to market. Quite an interesting area I find is that in terms of payment themselves, or in this instance, loyalty, that again, the chip and pin machine can now do an awful lot more. So where it can now have variable graphics, it can be far more engaging. We've got the opportunity now for a card based. So in other words, the payment card becomes the loyalty card. So there's an awful lot more that you can do in this instance. So it's an ideal solution for retail, restaurants, but instead of having a separate payment card or an app, which most people don't want to do anymore, you can now have a loyalty solution. So again, little ways to increase average spend, get customers through very quickly, and again, reduce fraud through these mechanisms. So the old Costa cards had a lot of fraud. You could even buy them on eBay. So yeah, in terms of something like this, it's a great way for a business to keep retention, drive loyalty, and actually increase the average spend. So it's very, very good for customers to see it, as well as for the business in terms of the improved revenue. Won't go too much into these. I think we've all seen the QR codes. Again, mindful we may have a few people from charities on the line. There are ways and means for this to be integrated into an existing solution or completely standalone. I say for a charity in particular, in my opinion, great opportunity, because instead of having expensive payment devices, you could literally just have a poster with a QR code and take donations very, very simply. So lots of different ways that these can be used. Sorry, I know I'm going very quickly through these. Virtual terminals. So there's always been ways to take payments over the phone. You can manually key those into a machine, but more traditionally now, or more how the things are looking in the future, is the fact that you can take payment over the phone, but pushing out a payment link. A lot of businesses have really started to adopt this, in particular in the travel sector. And the main reason for that is you could pay 24/7. You haven't got to wait for a member of staff, and it's more secure is probably the main thing. So it's the idea now that instead of paying over the phone, which was always liable to chargebacks and problems of fraud, it's a far more secure method, and it goes through 3D Secure. Mentioned before about the embedded payments. So a lot of software platforms are now trying to move to offering this as a service. You'll notice probably Shopify is the main one that most of you would recognize. Shopify has Shop Pay, but again, it's bearing in mind that these platforms can be quite locked down, and unfortunately, where it's a lockdown platform, pricing often does become a bit of an issue. And again, it's just being mindful. Again, we'll share this to go into all of it, but there's a lot of variables when it comes to card processing in terms of the costs, the fees, and how things can be layered on. And it's understanding all of that, in particular when you look at card holder not present, e-commerce, and international fees. A lot of these can be fairly hidden. But like I say, if you're looking at something like Shop Pay, then you are slightly locked in, and it's always worth being very, very aware and mindful of those. One thing that often gets forgotten in terms of a price conversation is that actually is how quickly payments are going through and how many of them are going through. So, for example, I spoke to a client recently that only 85% of their volume was going through properly first time. That other 15%, all of those clients are having to call in and take time with a customer services representative, and also that was then going on a less secure payment method. So actually, price is important, but obviously optimizing those payments and getting more through, as well as giving your customers opportunities to pay in a way that they want to pay, is fairly critical, because that could actually mean more sales for your business. You may have mentioned before about the accounts to account, but bearing in mind, probably 50% plus of transactions now take place on a mobile phone. So if you haven't got Apple Pay, Google Pay, huge problem. But there are also now a lot of other methods coming in. Buy now, pay later is a very, very common one. So Klarna and PayPal Credit. But again, often I would advise to clients to be very cautious of adopting these. So if you are thinking of them, please reach out and we can talk through methods. And again, equally, PayPal, 10 years ago, I would say it was absolutely essential. It's understanding these as to how critical they are, or again, if you're in different countries, international and local payment methods. I probably won't go too much into this because I'm mindful of time now, but payment facilitator, again, payment wise, a lot of businesses think they can be the next eBay or next marketplace. there's a huge amount of regulation in these areas now. So, you know, to be the next Uber, etc., there are ways and means to do it, but you have to be of a certain scale. And again, we can talk about how that works and feels. Something that's probably do want to spend a bit more time on very briefly is contextual commerce, also known as phygital commerce. This will probably be of great interest to anyone of marketing background, but this can work in any real way. But any business who is selling a lot through social media and is currently locked in that ecosystem of all of their data is staying within Facebook or it's going to TikTok, this is the way to break it. And one of the best ways I would analogize some of this is if you are a retail business, instead of having just your items on a shelf, if you have a QR code, you can have your clients scan that with their phone, and they would then go to a section of or a subsection of a website. They could theoretically order in 2 clicks. So let's say they've left your shop and they're thinking about the purchase 4 hours later, they're already on your website rather than going to Amazon. But more importantly, you can serve up rich content. So that could be an influencer, that could be a shop guide, that could be size guide. All of these things make it far, far easier to retain that client. And just to give you some headlines, you know, it could mean a click at checkout is as slow as 5 seconds, 3 times faster than traditional methods, and it's a 2-click checkout using this process. So you could use anything you wished. But contextual commerce is seen as a very much future of an industry, and it's a way that can work for any industry type as well. So retail, hospitality, events, these are all really, really great verticals. And then just a quick overview. So again, mindful of time, there's an awful lot that we can do to help at Payment Guru. You know, like I say, the bulk of what we do is to actually come in as a pseudo consultancy to basically say, look, how are you doing things? But a lot of the time, because of the way that we're powered, our solution providers or our acquirers would actually pay our fees. So if you do want to have a discussion, we're very, very open. We'll always just give you a very honest answer of what we can and can't do or what the options are available. And like I say, most of the time, our fees don't actually get charged to you. I apologise. Like I say, there was an awful lot to cram into that. And hopefully not too far over, Henry. And I'm mindful I left comments to the end. So yeah, apologies again, but hopefully that's given you some food for thought and we can go to Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tony. Yeah, like you said, if you have any questions at all, feel free to put those in the chat. Equally, you're welcome to just unmute and ask away. So if you do have any questions, if anyone would like to unmute, feel free to. Just give it a moment. Anybody have any questions at all?
I've got one, Henry.
Perfect.
Hi, Tony. When you talked about the open banking and the big transactions, I was thinking that normally we pay on a credit card, certainly our deposit, because then we get protections as a consumer in case that company went bust or didn't deliver what we wanted. Is there a similar protection if you did it paying by open banking?
At the moment, not. There are talks for something to be enacted, although I think kind of just it's a very good question, but I think it's kind of just a reality check that the reason that protection is there is because the card issuer is actually earning a fee as the card acquirer is. So again, these are very ballpark numbers, but it just gives a perspective. So, you know, on a credit card, let's say that the card issuer, the people who gave the card out the bank, is earning back 0.3%. And the processor might have been getting about the same again. If you start moving large transactions instead to a pence per transaction model, there's no money in the system. So for someone to get that protection built in, it just wouldn't really be feasible. It would be covered. Let's say if we talk about holidays, so something like ABTA, they cover the debit, they cover the just payments by bank as well. So depending on the industry, you could still get the coverage. It just wouldn't be through a card or a similar mechanism. There is talk, like I say, of doing it, but the irony would be that it would probably mean that there's more rate parity, which kind of argues, is it worth doing?
Thank you, Tony. That was really interesting. Thank you.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you, Lucia. Does anyone else have any more questions at all? Feel free to ask away now. Any questions? Judy, I saw you've just made a point in the chat. Would you like to unmute and sort of ask the question or make the point to discuss with Tony?
Hi, yeah, sorry, I just wanted to flag up. I'm working at Assets Accountancy in Ashford, and we've got a new team which is specialising in the back end of all this stuff, where you've then got to get all these transactions to record properly in your account system, and we're helping clients sort of integrate the systems that Tony would put in with their accounts. So we're a national team, but we just so happen that two of us are based in Ashford, so we're local as well. So yeah, just if people are struggling with that side of it, then drop me a line and I can tell you a bit about what we can do.
If you don't mind, Judy, can we actually pick up offline? Because
yeah, definitely, yeah.
Some of the other things we're doing, it wasn't apt to bring into the wider thing, but we're building potentially what we'll have is a payment layer, and it's very, very API focused and driven. So effectively, to integrate what we do into you do might be fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a fair point though, Judy, because I think if you look at the way payments can go through, sometimes it's very simple, and sometimes it's really not. And it really depends on the systems and the subsystems. And
that's right. We're finding that, some systems out of the box, clients can pretty much do things themselves, but where they've got, multiple systems and other ways of getting payments in, and they need someone to sort of take an overview and make sure it's all coming into their accounts in a sensible way and not going to cause a massive headache or VAT issues or something at the the end of the quarter, because we know the accounting side and we know the digital side. So yeah, we can help on that. But yeah, definitely a good idea to pick up another time.
But yeah, I think just coming back to the account payments, there's a lot of providers that they can technically do the payment, but you will just get these drip feed of payments coming in throughout the day.
Yeah.
Which, although that's nice in some ways, you're getting money in, reconciling that can be a huge
exactly
headache.
Yeah.
So there's different ways of doing it, kind of batch transactions, but again, it's not every provider set up that way. And again, there's some real quirks how some providers do things on different times. It is time zones, I guess, but it's not they're processing, say, in Gibraltar or whatever. It's more that they're batching at a certain time of day, and again, it can cause quite a few headaches depending on the setup of everything. But yeah, it's online in particular, in my opinion. It's just making sure things flow through, and then you can reconcile order to payment.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I think we've got time for one more question. And Laura, I can see that you've posted a question in the chat. So would you like to unmute to ask your question?
Hi, Tony. I was just interested to see what your thoughts were on the payment providers in terms of the older legacy ones versus the newer ones like Dojo, Planet Pay, Freedom Pay, etc.
That's fine. So, because I know I've worked with you guys in the past as well. So, so I'll give you mixed answers. So some of the traditional providers like the Worldpays, the Barclaycards, they've still got kind of a place in the market, but at the same time, some of their solution is a little bit more old hat. They're quite useful as a core acquirer, so the person at the back end, but often to have a sort of a newer front face is better. When we start looking at someone like Dojo, so for everyone else's benefit, Dojo grew out of Payment Sense. Payment Sense were the largest reseller of my old employer, Fiserv, and they've then built their own payment technology, etc. Dojo in particular is still relatively new. They've got an amazing market share for who they are, but the actual technology is still a little bit basic. And I would argue that some of their route to market has been tad crude, but fair play to them. There's kind of more interesting things down the pipe, and again, their technology is quite a locked ecosystem. So if you kind of break some of their technology up, so they use the PAX A920 device, the chip and pin machine. You can potentially sort of drive a wedge down some of this and use, sorry, I'm going to go very jargon heavy for a few guys, but using sort of like the PAX store, you can actually open up a hell of a lot more technology and things that you get access to, like the loyalty system. I mean, that's one of many. I can probably pick up with you afterwards to sort of show some of the other things that you could or couldn't do. Yeah, I mean, there's probably quite a few things I can talk to, because I know obviously your business, because I used to work with David quite a bit. But yeah, I'd probably say something like Dojo is interesting, but you can probably have far more flexible options and slightly more agnostic options as well, which sometimes is a benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And that brings us quite nicely to the end of the session. So firstly, I'd just like to thank Tony again from Payment Guru for being the host of this session. Tony, thank you so much. It was really engaging. And I appreciate that you fit in a lot of information into quite a tight time frame. So well done for doing so. I'd also just finally like to thank Emily, who's here from Not Another Marketing Agency, who are the sponsors of this Business Bites webinar. So with that in mind, I'd like to wish everyone a great rest of your day, and thank you ever so much for joining. Goodbye.
Everyone, and thank you, Emily.
Thank you.